Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Meaningful Live. Simon Jacobson here, and I welcome you. We'll be speaking about why is self-harm not allowed? Who owns your body? Perhaps a little more provocative way of putting it. This program is dedicated by Molly Wine and Jeffrey Silverman in honor of their 22nd anniversary. It's a question I've been asked many times. Maybe you've wondered about it as well. Who owns your body? Who owns your life? So for some of us, the knee-jerk reaction would be, I own my life. No one else does. I can do whatever I like with my life. But is that really accurate? So let's discuss this. We know today, sadly, there are people who do self-mutilation. They cut themselves, they harm themselves in different ways. You go further, the tragic reality of suicide, which is not really the scope of what I want to speak about here, but definitely something that needs to be looked at. And it's interesting, in our society, at least in the Western world, we know that if somebody's attempting suicide, they'll mobilize the police and the fire department and so on to do whatever possible to dissuade anyone from killing themselves. Now, why don't we just say it's that person's personal right? Why do we intervene? We're not talking about hurting someone else. You're hurting yourself for whatever reason. And I'm not here to argue the political or the religious or the ideological points on this topic. It's just we see that society has its own standards. And it's not so black and white. Obviously, I think we all can agree that we have no right to hurt someone else. But when it comes to ourselves, why not? And then what defines harm? For one person, a tattoo is beautifying themselves. Another person, it's a scar, a wound, an injury. So the question really is understanding what life is really about. And there are many perspectives on this topic. Now, I like to look at things from a universal context. As you probably know, even though I did grow up, and I do come from a traditional Jewish background, and I could obviously advocate and present the Jewish approach, the so-called religious approach. But that's not what I like to do. That's not my role. I like to find the common universal truths that we all can embrace, that transcend, that are non-denominational and transcend denominations, transcend faith and religion. As a matter of fact, as those of you familiar with some of my thoughts know, that I actually do not like the word religion. I don't like the word faith, for that matter, or even the word God, because it has become so stereotyped that everyone has different meanings in it. And without really defining what you mean, we just end up with words and semantics. So really the question is, what is life? What is the dignity of life? What rights do we have? We do believe, or most of us believe at least, that we do have rights. You take the Declaration of Independence and it talks about rights, the freedoms that we have, the inalienable rights endowed to us by our Creator, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, the freedom to pursue happiness. We believe in the free press, and so on. Assembly, freedom to assemble. So are freedoms that many of us agree upon. There are many freedoms that we disagree upon. Some people consider freedom, other people feel that's infringing on someone else's freedom. And the debate rages on and on. But I would like to focus on and speak about here about our very lives. Do we have a right over our very lives? Well, what right do we have? And why should we not have the right to harm ourselves or even to take our lives? Be interesting to hear what your thoughts are, and I invite you to please share them in the comments, either now or whenever you watch this. But I'll share a perspective that resonates with me. I'm not here to debate it. I'm not here to prove it. I'm here to just tell you something that resonates. I saw it in a commentary. It was a commentary on Maimonides. and by a commentator. His name was Rabbi David ben Radbaz. That's his acronym. Rabbi David, that was his name. Rabbi David. We're talking here now in the 11th century, 12th century. He said, interesting expression. He says, the body of a human being is the property of God. It's divine property. Because we didn't create our own bodies. We didn't create our own souls. We're not self-made human beings. We also are not owned by our parents. So because our parents were so-called the facilitators, and I don't mean to say that in a dismissive way. Our parents definitely provided the seed that fertilized an egg, that conceived of a child. In many ways, our parents, and I'm not getting now into healthy, unhealthy parents, but our parents do deserve the credit for bringing us into this world, for nurturing us, for bringing us up. But they don't own us. So who then owns a human being? Is there such a thing as ownership? Can you go to a court of law and argue about the ownership of a human being? So this has been discussed. There's even that court case, that strange case where a son sued his parents for all the expenses of his lifetime. He says, I didn't bring myself into this world. My parents did, so they should pay for everything, and so on. He ended up losing the case because both his parents happened to be lawyers. But that's another discussion, parents and children. So generally speaking, the courts will say that nobody owns your life. You own your own life, but do you really own it? If that's the case, then a person should be allowed to commit suicide, God forbid, or do other things that are harmful. And yet we see that society does intervene when we think that someone's behaving in a way that may not make sense. Maybe they're mentally unstable, maybe other things. But is it our right to intervene? So let me go back to this commentator that says that the human being, life, body and soul, are God's property. What resonated with me, because one thing we all agree on, we did not create ourselves. So whether you believe in a God or you don't believe in a God, but the fact of the matter is that we are not our own creators. That is a very humble and important statement, because it means that we're not self-made. Life didn't begin and end with you. Again, whether you believe in purpose, whether you believe that you evolved, whether you believe that there is some higher divine entity that placed you here, and I do, and I will share with that. But regardless, one thing is for sure, we did not create ourselves. Why is that important? And I believe that's why the founding fathers wrote, all men are created equal. They don't write, all men are born equal. They don't write, all men are equal. And I say men, I mean all human beings. Because they understood that if it's not attributed to some form of a creator, whether it's a religious context or not religious context, then anyone can come and say, hey, I said all people are equal, and now I'm saying we're not all equal. Once you say it's creator, it means it's something not us. We didn't do that, so I can't take away your freedom because I didn't give it to you. I didn't create you, you didn't, and you didn't create me. We can't take away each other's freedoms. Simply not, doesn't make any sense. I remember reading, we all know in insurance policies, they all talk about what insurance covers. And then it says it doesn't cover a hurricane, it doesn't cover this storm, that storm, and all acts of God. And I was wondering, I say, don't we have a separation of church and state, and not everyone believes in God? Why do we suddenly have acts of God in every insurance policy? So I was thinking about it, and I asked some insurance lawyers who write up these documents. I say, why is it acts of God? And this was my theory. I don't know if I ever found actual proof, but it sounds right to me anyway. If it was to say acts of nature, or acts, just plain acts, then you could always say, 1 second, why am I liable? Maybe the insurance company should be liable. But once you can find a scapegoat called God, acts of God, it's God's problem. Why should I be paying for a storm or for any natural event that's an act of God? So it's when God is convenient to be used, suddenly he's introduced. But that's an aside, just a little footnote here. Getting back to the topic at hand, the point being is it's a statement of utter humility and utter truth, I would say, that life is not our own. And that creates a certain element of respect. I don't know if you remember, it was, how many years ago was this? The Columbine tragedy in Colorado, where a few students armed with with pistols and rifles and whatever, artillery, killed their own classmates and then end up killing themselves. I mean, it was a big thing. I mean, unfortunately, it's happened more than once. And they were not seen, these kids was analyzed and was investigated. They were not seen as mentally unstable or in any way particularly depressed or venting or making a statement, a political statement. It was just an act of, a wanton act of just, I guess, a thrill killing, whatever you want to call it. And I remember, for some reason, it captured my attention, and I started looking into it, and I was saying, why? Why would they do that? And I remember speaking at different schools at the time. I was in Australia then. I remember there was a big school in Mariah in Sydney, Australia. And I asked the students there, young men and women, I said, do you think a thing like this could happen here in Australia? I thought they'd say definitely not, because we don't have the violence and the media. Yeah, they said absolutely. So I said, why? Why would anyone do that? They said, because life is not valuable. It's not that they wanted to kill someone. If you don't really consider life sacred, your life, your own life, you're also not going to consider someone else's life sacred. So let's talk about this word sanctity. Sanctity. Sanctity means it's not yours. It means there's something greater. You want to use the word transcendent. Some higher truth to life. At least let's all acknowledge there's a mystery to it. And because there's a mystery, I don't own it. You know, we live in a world of commodities, of ownership, of acquisitions. There are things that we cannot acquire. There are things that we don't own. And those are all the real things in life. Life itself we don't own. Truth, soul, love. Everything that's eternal, everything that's not man-made is in that category, and we'll call it sacred. So they respect the sanctity of life, the sanctity of a relationship, the dignity, you can even say the mystique, all means that it's not mine. That's the key. Now, I happen to attribute that not mine with the word God. What do I mean by God? As you know, I always say the famous story that I love, where Levi Yitzchak Berditchev said to the self-proclaimed atheist, the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. So when I mean by God, I mean something that is a higher reality, the essence of all reality, something beyond us, that we are an extension in the image of that higher transcendent entity, not the other way around. God is not created in our image. And that, in a sense, gives life its sanctity, gives life its true purpose. And where is it most expressed most? On the right. We have the right to take a life. Now, we all agree you can't take someone else's life, but to take our own, to harm a life. Why can't you really hurt another person? So most people will say, simply because then we lose all sense of coexistence. If I can kill you, you can kill me. But it's much deeper than that. It's because life is sacred. And the sanctity of life is another's as well as your own. And all of that is not your property. It's the respect of something that's greater than you. Let's take it a step further. You know, life poses many challenges. And many people say, hey, these challenges are just too much for me. I've had too much pain in my life. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. But when life has purpose, purpose, in a way, overrides pain. What do I mean by that? Not that it minimizes the pain, but it means there's something bigger than just the pain. But if life is just simply about pain and pleasure, if I have too much pain, it's just too much. So it's really about understanding, having a broader perspective, a broader horizon on what the definition of life is. Life is your unique, the dignity of your indispensable role in this world. And no one has a right in any way to undermine others and not yourself. That's not limiting you. It's not saying, I'm tying your hands and I'm not allowing you to have freedom. On the contrary, it's saying that even when you're in a bad mood, and even when things seem not to be working, there are things that are greater than your mood. They're greater than your logic. They're greater than your calculations and your machinations. And that is your very life itself. I remember a real story. It's a really painful story. A person who lived a very difficult life. Lost a parent at a young age. And then the other parent, the mother, started ailing as well. Very difficult. And so many other aspects of life I don't want to go into all the details right now, but it was a miserable life. I was friendly with this person. He would come to my classes. And I always would, it wasn't an argument, I would always like encourage and say, look, as bad as things are, you're a beautiful person. You have that spark. You have that soul. And let's work with that. Let's work with that. And times it was helpful to him. Many times it wasn't. But I remember when his mother passed away, after his father passed away when he was at young age, and really was at loss. He says, I don't have anything left. And he just wanted to give up, and he wanted to take his life, to be honest. And I didn't feel it's my right to tell him what to do. But I just felt knowing him was my responsibility to some way give him hope. And I did see potential. I saw a lot of great things in him that he was not able to see. Like a black hole, that the gravitational pull is so powerful, doesn't let any light out. And I have to tell you, we kept on talking. I would invite him to different events. I invite him to my table, Shabbat table, and other things. Over time, he ultimately agreed. He met someone at one of my classes, and he ended up marrying her. And it was hard for him, because it was hard for him to commit. Not just for himself. He says, I don't want to put someone else through all of this. I don't want to bring children into this world. I have to tell you, years have passed. And it's not that often, but from time to time he'll tell me, I have to thank you. Because you kept on holding on to the fact that you did not give up on me. You believed that my life was valuable. You believed in it more than I believed in it. And I have to say, it's somewhat embarrassing, because you would think that no one would believe more in themselves than anyone else. And he asked me once, where does that come from? I said, because that's the whole basis of everything I stand for. That life is sacred. Your life is sacred. My life is sacred. Your life is not less sacred than mine. So it's an attitude. The sensitivity to life is not just to other people, it's also to your own life. So if you think about it, not to harm yourself is also part of that. Just as a person has to know their fault, they also have to know their qualities, and they have to respect it. In a sense, you have people who have low self-esteem. They loathe themselves. That's a form of arrogance. You say, why is that arrogant? Because sometimes arrogance takes on the shape that you're pompous, full of yourself, overconfident, to the point of abrasive and condescending and so on. But sometimes arrogance can take the shape, an inverted shape, that you are convinced you're worthless. Who are you to say you're worthless? Since when are you the final say? You're not God. You didn't create yourself. The fact that you exist means that you matter. That means that you're indispensable. That in some way, some larger cosmic plan wants you here. And you yourself don't have a right to challenge that. Your job is to figure out how to live up and actualize your calling, not whether you have a calling or not. And someone will say, why are you taking away my right? I can do whatever I like. Of course you can do whatever you like. But the point of the matter, it says, it's not taking away your freedom, it's respecting that you exist. And we have to understand that in a way that is absolute. There's no ifs or buts. It's not a relative thing. It's not arbitrary. Now again, I said at the outset, I'm not here to prove this case. Some people may disagree and say, hey, you know what, we're just evolved bacteria, and we matter as much as another grain of sand on a beach with trillions of grains of sand. And we've just evolved accidentally from different species and different forms of life and so on. I don't want to debate this, because that's a debate that can perhaps go nowhere. Each of us has to make decisions about these matters, of how we see our lives, we see the sanctity of life. So the question of right to harm yourself, who owns your body, is not just a technical question. It's a broader question about what life is all about. So I'd like to say, on a final note, your life is absolutely sacred. Not just to me, but to you as well, and to every person. And the same things with each one of us. We're all part of an indispensable musical notes in a large cosmic composition, and we need to value that. We need to respect it. We need to hold it sacred, because that is ultimately the final frontier. That's where it ends. Because if we give up on that, everything else falls. Because if life truly does not matter, then our choices don't truly matter, our decisions don't really matter, everything becomes optional. Now, again, do I have mathematical scientific proofs for this? To me, it's not relevant, that, because I don't want life to be a product of a mathematical equation. As I said before, truth, life itself, sanctity, soul, love. These are things that are not controlled, they're not owned by us. So it's not for us to have to try to figure them out, meaning whether they're real or not. Truth is truth because it's true, not because I decided it's true. The question is, do we submit to that? Do we respect it? Do we hold it sacred? And when we hold that sacred, then we hold sacred our relationships as well, our connections, our symbiosis, our interconnectivity and synergy, that we all need each other as well in that context. So, some food for thought, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback, and even rebuttals if you have that. If you have that to bring, that's also sacred, frankly. And may we all be able to respect ourselves even more than we may think we respect ourselves, in the good way. Not respect every indulgence and every whim that we have, but respect the very essence that defines why we're here, the purpose of our lives. And when you do that, you'll fight for it. You'll fight for yourself, you'll fight for others to make sure that that sanctity is preserved and actualized. And I like to believe that that's part of what my life is dedicated to, and the Meaningful Life Center. So this has been Simon Jacobson of the Meaningful Life Center. MeaningfulLife.com is our website. Please subscribe to our growing YouTube channel, and please share. Yes, share. Share with other sacred souls and bodies. And I'd love to hear thoughts, feedback, comments, as I said. And it's always a great honor to be able to talk one kindred spirit to another, one sacred spirit to another. Be blessed and be well. I look forward to see you soon again. Thank you so much.